Kitco News special coverage of Consensus 2024 is brought to you by Diamond Standard.
Hello, I'm Michelle Makori, and this is Kitco News coming to you from Consensus 2024 in Austin, and I am honored to be joined by Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi from the 8th District of Illinois. So good to have you with us, Congressman.
Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. Congressman, I know we're short on time. Let's get straight into it.
Sure.
You're here. We have a number of people from across the aisle at this conference. Congressman Emma, Senator Ron Wyden, Congressman McHenry. Big political presence at this year's Consensus. Why was it important for you to attend this year?
Well, I think that some people in Congress and otherwise think that crypto is a fad, crypto is a scam, it's some kind of fly-by-night operation, but actually it's not. And it's something that perhaps 50 million Americans at this point have as part of their portfolio. And a lot of voters actually form their viewpoints based on how the government regulates this particular space. So I thought it's very important to come and listen and learn and also express my views with regard to this subject.
And what are your views briefly on the subject?
Well, I think that we have to develop a regulatory framework that puts guardrails in place to prevent nefarious activities with regard to crypto, but does not stifle innovation. We always have to create an innovation economy in this country if we're going to maintain our standards of living and ensure prosperity for the future.
Right. So as you mentioned, it does seem as though this is becoming a big election topic
Sure.
for 2024. In fact, according to a recent Harris poll, 1/3 of U.S. voters say that they will be weighing candidates' crypto views before voting. This poll was funded by Bitcoin ETF issuer Grayscale. And the perception is, Congressman, that Republicans are more in favor of crypto than Democrats. President Trump has been very pro-crypto recently. He was speaking, saying that he wants to ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in the U.S., not driven overseas. He says he's going to, quote, stop Joe Biden's crusade to crush crypto, keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons away from your Bitcoin, never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency. To be fair, Trump had a different position back in 2021.
Right. I'm shocked.
But he has now come around. He's very pro-crypto, backing it up and also saying that he is accepting donations in cryptocurrencies. As we know, he also has his own NFT collection. Very positive for the crypto environment. And that has perhaps forced a change of tone from the Biden administration. We've recently heard from the Biden campaign that they're reaching out to crypto industry players. They're seeking guidance now from the crypto community and crypto policy moving forward. Is this a conscious shift? Do you think that the Democrats are now looking at this voter bloc and going, we can't afford to ostracize this pro-crypto crowd? Is the Democrat mentality coming around?
I think that Democrats generally want to make sure that those nefarious activities that we hear about don't somehow, kind of infect the crypto environment. And so I think more and more Democrats are starting to learn as much as they can to prevent that from happening, but enabling the innovation to occur. I think that as we near an election, obviously, voters are going to ask questions like, where do you stand on crypto? Where do you stand on Bitcoin? And so that, forces people to think it through. We just had a vote recently on Fit 21, and that was a big vote. So that also got people to think through their positions. And I think as people reasoned it out, it became clear to many Democrats that, we have to have a regulatory environment that's appropriate for the issue at hand.
So you think it's more a question of Democrats not being that informed, that educated on the topic, and now as they're gaining more access to information,
familiarity,
they're changing their views, as opposed to what some have said is just pandering ahead of the elections?
No, I think it's more becoming familiar with the issues. Take me, for example. My oldest son would be talking about crypto all the time, but I didn't quite understand what he was talking about until I dug in for myself. And now I feel a little bit more enlightened about it. I'm a novice, I'm not an expert, But what I do know is that there's something stellar about the blockchain technology that we have to make sure that the prosperity and wealth that comes from developments here stay in the U.S.
So, Congressman, you mentioned FIT 21. You did vote for it, the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act. You were one of 71 Democrats that voted yes, so some bipartisanship there. The act provides new authority for the CFTC in installing it as the leading regulatory of digital assets. It establishes clear and functional federal requirements over digital asset markets, provides the robust consumer protections and regulatory clarity necessary for the digital asset ecosystem to thrive in the U.S., cementing American leadership of the global financial system while reinforcing the role of America as a hub for innovation. It's a mouthful. I'm giving you the abridged version for our viewers that are not familiar with it. You voted for it.
Yes, ma'am.
The expectation is that it's not going to pass in the Senate. What do you think is going to happen in the Senate? Do you think that there's going to be a change there now?
The interesting thing is that the Biden administration did not issue a veto threat with regard to this legislation, which was an important tell. That told me that they would consider it if it came to the president's desk. Now, obviously, it has to get through the Senate, and so it'll be up to Chuck Schumer and Leader McConnell to decide how they would actually treat this legislation for purposes of voting.
Well, recently the Biden administration did say that they were opposed to this legislation, that they wouldn't necessarily veto it, but that they were opposed to this legislation. You're for it. What would you say to your fellow Democrats in the Senate that are not for this bill, or the ones in the House that voted against it? Why did you push this forward, and why do you think they should?
Well, we have zero regulation today. We are in the Wild West with regard to crypto. We need at least a floor, and this regulation provides that floor. It's not a ceiling. I mean, over time, it might adapt to changing circumstances and needs, but we got to start somewhere. We got to provide certainty. If there's not certainty, then people won't be able to innovate. And we don't want that innovation to, for instance, go overseas and for that wealth and prosperity to be created elsewhere.
So you do think there's a chance that this will pass in the Senate?
I think there's a chance.
There's always a chance, but what would you put that odds are?
I'm not a betting person, but I would just say that in order for something to survive in the Senate, you need 60 votes. So that effectively means the entire Republican caucus plus 10 to 15 Democrats. And I would hazard to guess that there are 10 to 15 Democrats that would consider voting for this legislation. Now, there's always the possibility of amendments to make it better, to improve it. So I think we should allow for that possibility as well.
All right, well, Congressman, let's talk about another act that I was surprised that you voted against, and that is House Majority Whip Tom Emmer's CBDC Anti-Surveillance State Act. Congressman Emmer was here at the conference as well discussing that bill. You voted against this. The House passed it in a vote of 216 to 192. Again, the bill, broadly speaking, aims to block the Federal Reserve from directly offering a CBDC to individuals and using it to implement monetary policy. It says that we need authorization from Congress before this can be done, and that any digital currency needs to be open, permissionless, and private, and to emulate cash. That's the broad strokes of this. Why did you vote against this?
Well, because I want to make sure that we don't foreclose the possibility of the Federal Reserve, creating something that could satisfy the legitimate concerns of, numerous Americans. We don't want to be in the business of, again, stifling potential innovation, even with regard to this particular issue, just as we don't want to be stifling innovation with regard to private sector, development of crypto. So I think they're consistent positions.
I get that, Congressman, but the bill doesn't necessarily say that. It just says that it doesn't want the Fed to pass this unilaterally, that it needs to get congressional authority. And in fact, it does say that we can continue to launch our economy deeper into the digital age without jeopardizing who we are as Americans. That is, according to Emma's, that the bill is designed to ensure that that happens. And in fact, The act says amendments made by this act shall not apply to any dollar-denominated currency that is open, permissionless, and private, and fully preserves the privacy protections of the United States coins and physical currency. So it does add a caveat. It doesn't shut the door to a digital currency.
Except it requires congressional approval
Why
to
would
start
that be bad?
Because have you noticed Congress lately? It's not the best functioning organization in the world. And unfortunately, what we see over and over, whether it's aid to Ukraine or action on the border or doing things that are desperately required and timely, Congress does not act in an expeditious fashion. All that being said, I like Tom Emmer. He's a friend of mine, and I'd like to work with him and others to see how we can put forward legislation that would address his concerns and ours.
Because, Congressman, there are a lot of concerns about a CBDC, especially considering that this is the brainchild of the People's Bank of China, that this originated in China. And at this conference, Emma said that, it's a CCP-style surveillance tool, a Chinese Communist Party surveillance tool. He's very concerned that this allows government to monitor transactions, that this allows a potential social credit system to be implemented, as we've seen in China, with digital IDs, with a central bank digital currency linked to a social credit system that allows for a potential dystopian future. He, and I'm quoting him here, it cannot be used in a way that the Chinese have deployed their digital yuan to build social credit scores on their citizens based on their purchases and their behavior.
I agree with that 100%.
These types of tools cannot exist in a free society like ours, and we should only accept a digital currency that's consistent with our values, American values.
I agree 100%. All I'm saying is don't foreclose the possibility that the executive branch should be able to start the process of looking at it. Here's what's going on. I'm the ranking member of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP is about to, basically try to displace the dollar through the digital renminbi. It's the absolute worst possible digital asset because it does the opposite of the spirit of crypto, which is it centralizes authority. It doesn't like the absence of anonymity. It wants to know who's using what, where, when, and why. We don't want that. At the same time, in the competition, we should be able to explore what it would take to potentially have a competitive instrument to the digital renminbi. Now, right now, we also need some kind of regulatory framework with regard to stable coins. We don't have that. So if you have the digital renminbi, you don't have a regulatory framework for stable coins, and you prevent the executive branch from taking action, basically what you've done is you've tied both hands behind the U.S. taxpayers' back. And I will never do that. I will never allow us to succumb to the CCP.
So, Congressman, you're against waiting for Congress to authorize the start of this, but it has been initiated by the executive order that President Biden put forward that allows for the exploration of a digital currency.
And he wants to squelch it. That's a bad idea.
President Biden has agreed
Emmer
to.
wants to squelch it with this bill.
Is it not about having Congress final approval? Not necessarily saying we can't look into it because you've already got the executive order that allows for it, but just having Congress make sure that the safety rails are there.
I've seen a lot of litigation on this in my time in Congress. What will end up happening is that if this goes into effect, there will be a lawsuit against the executive branch to stop them in their tracks. I think my good friend Tom and I and others should come together, address his concerns, address mine, and potentially have a situation where we can address the stablecoin issue. That is a fundamental problem.
Well, let's talk about that because you are on the committee to curtail the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party.
Win the competition.
Win the competition. Okay.
Right.
We could the select committee on the CCP, and that's a very important issue. And you mentioned stablecoins. You also briefly discussed that perhaps there's an effort by the Chinese to usurp the supremacy of the US dollar. We know that the BRICS currency have been proactive in this de-dollarization trend, encouraging trade in their own currencies away from the dollar. buying gold at record levels in central banks.
Right.
Some have argued that having a US stablecoin is a way for the dollar to maintain supremacy in a way. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's very interesting. I've been learning more about that here at Consensus. And so I'm going to be working with my staff to look into this more, because I think if you can have a situation where stablecoins were backed by dollars and people had some assurance that there's something behind the stablecoins, I think that could be a very intriguing possibility. What I don't want to see, however, is a situation where the digital renminbi somehow comes out first, or the Chinese are able to set international standards with regard to what digital currencies could actually be. And in that process, basically ice us out. Now, am I worried about the long-term stability of the dollar? Yes. Why? Because our fiscal house is not in order. Okay, it's just not. So we just got to be honest about that. So we're kind of hurting ourselves, hurting the strength of the dollar with our own action. So we have to get our house in order. However, at the end of the day, I think the dollar will still reign supreme, because there's no rule of law in the CCP. So that's why the current renminbi is a crappy currency. So making it a digital currency doesn't mean it's any less of a crappy currency.
Arguably more so. Would you see Bitcoin as a challenge to the supremacy of the US dollar? As an alternative monetary system?
Do I see crypto?
Bitcoin specifically.
Bitcoin. Well, I think the problem with the Bitcoin, as you know, as many people know, is it fluctuates wildly in value, right? I can't go to the Starbucks and offer a Bitcoin and know that I'm going to get the same number of cups of coffee today that I did yesterday. That being said, who knows what's going to happen? Let's not foreclose the possibility of innovation such that perhaps some kind of stable coin or something that would keep its value would be another good store of value. I don't want to foreclose that possibility.
Keeping the doors open there. Do you own any Bitcoin?
I don't trade any individual securities, buy any individual instruments, including Bitcoin, because me and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Matt Gaetz actually have a bill that we want to become law banning the purchase and trading of securities by members of Congress. I don't think we should be doing any of that, because we have too much insider information.
Well, many would argue that has benefited the likes of Nancy Pelosi, as well as some other representatives, current and past, where they do have inside information and have been able to trade off that information and really increase their portfolios. What kind of support do you have for this bill, and what would it entail?
We have the American people support. The vast majority of Americans, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, support my bill, so I'm going to push very hard.
Well, you got Matt Gaetz and AOC.
Right.
So clearly some unusual bipartisanship on that front.
That is correct. And I think because of that unusual alliance, I think that we will get movement. I'm going to push Speaker Mike Johnson as well.
Congressman, before we let you go, I know we're tight on time. Speaking of elections, you have voiced some concerns about Chinese interference in the elections. You wrote an op-ed, "The Chinese Communist Party wants to decide our elections for us. We can't allow it." That's the title of the op-ed you wrote in The Hill, saying that more voters are exercising their democratic rights than ever before, and the CCP is already on the edge of influencing our and the world's elections. How do you believe they're doing that?
Well, they do that through sophisticated social media campaigns, the same way they tried with Taiwan's recent election. They have deep fakes. They use artificial intelligence. They put out misinformation about candidates, either denigrating them or amplifying their opponents. Either way, I mean, we have to be on the lookout for it. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence has already said that they believe that the CCP is going to do that in the upcoming elections. I'm on the ballot myself. I'm seeking a contract extension. And so I'm going to be vigilant. I think all of us should be.
And what can we do about this? I mean, this is an area I would argue of another bipartisan overlap, where I'm sure both Republicans and Democrats would want no interference
I think that what we should do is, obviously we're protecting election infrastructure, and we've done a decent job of that since 2020. But now we also have to think about social media campaigns in a way that we haven't before. I personally think that big tech and social media should be responsible for the content of their platforms. Right now they are not. They're immune from any liability associated with it. I think we have to create some kind of accountability. Otherwise, anything can get up there, and it could go viral fast, and it could confuse a lot of voters.
Don't want that. I know we're out of
Thank you.
time. We'll have to catch up again with
Awesome.
you soon. Really appreciate your time, Congressman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kitco News special coverage of Consensus 2024 is brought to you by Diamond Standard.